Friends, it's Sheryl from Tutoring with Sheryl and the Tech Coach for Tutors. And today I have my friend Gabrielle Crichlow from A Step Ahead Tutoring Services, and we are doing what we like to call a podcast swap. She has an awesome podcast called Hot Topics, and so you might actually see the same recording there. But our topic today is essay tips writing. And as I move forward on the slides, I'm going to have Gabrielle give a better introduction to herself and her tutoring services so that you can get to know her. She is a return guest on the show, and I'm so glad to have her. Gabrielle, why don't you go ahead and take a second and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, yes, we are doing a shared production. My name is Gabrielle Crichlow. I am the owner and director of A Step Ahead Tutoring Services, and I am the host of the Hot Topics podcast. So, yes, so you're going to be seeing this recording in multiple places, but in two interesting, unique styles. So, interested to see how this will come together. But yes, so A Step Ahead Tutoring Services is my company, and we'll probably get into more detail in terms of the promotion at the end.
Yes.
But yes, so we're two tutors coming together. We're joining forces today, and we're here to talk about essay writing tips.
Yes.
So just I will share this disclaimer that this is meant to be very generic. As we understand, it's different tips for different age ranges and different grades. So this is meant to be very generic. But um, if you need any specific tips for your student, for your child, I encourage you to reach out to us and to hit us up. But
Absolutely.
essay
Here we
writing tips.
go.
Let's
And
do it.
we have 5 of them that we're going to go through. And I think we both can put a unique spin on this because I know that you support students from a variety of ages. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you advertise K through 12. Is that correct?
Well, specifically third grade. So third grade through 12 and even college as well. So third to college.
Right. So you're getting a much broader span of how you're supporting those students. And really my expertise is kindergarten through 6th grade. But when we talk about essay writing, I'm not writing an essay clearly with kindergarten, 1st or 2nd graders. So really from the perspective of developing a really strong writing habit, putting paragraphs together in a way that we've got, the strong topic, sentence, and moving forward from there. And so my perspective might be a little bit different from yours, but that's the beauty of being an educator. We bring our experiences in and we get to have those shared conversations. So when I was kind of putting this together, I actually I did an AI search. I was looking for a way to lay it out in a way that made sense to myself and to anybody that would be viewing this, because I know a lot of times people go online and they're looking for information like, how can I teach my child how to be a better writer? Or maybe you're a student, you're in high school and you're just like, I need a quick review. Or maybe you're in college and you're like, oh, I know there's ways to doing this. So let's start with tip number 1, know the purpose for your writing, the audience, and create your plan of action. Would you like to kind of take it from here, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, I'll let you keep going and I'll
Yeah,
just chime in.
absolutely. So the very first thing that you want to know is, what is your purpose for writing? Are you writing something that is nonfiction? It's an essay about something that you've researched, or are you writing a personal narrative? You're a 3rd grader and you're writing, about yourself. And believe it or not, these essay writing tips can be applied to a multitude of different types of writing. So we want to, when it says analyze the prompt, it's really what were the directions for, or the expectations for what you're supposed to be writing, because in most cases, the kids are going to be asked to write about something. Then you want to brainstorm and outline your talking points. And I think it's really hard for the littler kids, because you say brainstorm and they're like, what is that? That's a really abstract concept. But teaching kids to write down their ideas or to use bubbles and put their ideas in their bubbles and grow their ideas with additional bubbles around them. You want to have some sort of an idea. That blank page is just a tough one, really, really tough. And then once you have your, the directions and you have some ideas, you can create that plan of action to move forward. But you have to have a really clear idea of what you're writing. That third one that says develop a clear and concise thesis, statement, or argument, that's probably more for like the persuasive writing, or you're taking a stance on something. It's an argumentative writing, or even just you're coming up with a clear statement about what you are writing about. And doesn't necessarily have to be argumentative, but you have to be able to have the topic, and then the introductory sentence that specifically states what is it that you're writing about. And that could be really tricky for kids that are new to writing, struggling writers, or parents that are even just trying to help their kids get started with their writing. So I have a question for you, Gabrielle. When you go to help your students maybe do some brainstorming, do you have a strategy that's maybe worked for a student that you could share, or any talking points that you'd like to talk about for tip number 1?
Yeah, so particularly with the brainstorming, and I'll preface it like this. So for the younger grades, I would usually, so well, I'll preface before the preface. So you definitely want to know what you're writing, right? So what is it? Is it persuasive? Is it just are you trying to get someone to believe your argument? Are you trying to just kind of spell explain things as they are? So you definitely want to um, identify what you're writing. But in terms of brainstorming in general, I like to ask a lot of open-ended questions. So, and that could go across the board. So I would say something like, so if a student is stuck, right? They don't really have any ideas as to how to explain things further. I may say, so why is this important to you? Or where else have what I need an example.
Have
An
you
example.
had any
Yeah.
experiences with it? Or sometimes, okay, so I just had this happen this last week. I'm having all of my students do some writing, and one of my students wanted to be a teacher, but so I said, my prompt was, when you grow up, what do you want to be? What would that look like for you? And she was like, well, I think I want to be a teacher. And I said, okay, well, what kind of a teacher? And she was across the board, a ballet teacher, an art teacher, whatever teacher. And so I said, well, okay, tell me what you already know about being a teacher. And then what would it look like if you were an art teacher? And she didn't really know. And I said, well, let's go do a little research on that. Sometimes they have this idea, but they don't have the background knowledge to even write about it. Another instance is where a student of mine was trying to answer some sort of a reading question. He came with his reading homework, and I really don't remember what the prompt was, but it had something to do with airplanes. And so he'd never been on an airplane. He'd never been to an airport. I mean, we're talking young kids here. So we had to go do a little bit of research, just that background. Hop online and look at pictures of airplanes, and what does an airport look like, and what does it mean to go through security, and what does it mean that your luggage is going to be stored. Just not understanding that just to answer a question. It wasn't even an essay. You just had to write a sentence about it. So sometimes just doing some research and building that background knowledge is going to help them brainstorm. I mean, they don't even have a place to start. So we have to assume that they know nothing sometimes.
Right. So let's pick that example. So I want to be a teacher. Okay. So, well, I would avoid, I know before I said, why do you want to be a teacher? But I would say, okay, so tell me more about that. Right. So that's my mental health counseling background. That's our favorite line. Tell me more. Um, so you want to be a teacher? Tell me more about that. And I'll whatever they say, like, oh, I like working with kids. Working with kids doing what? Like, what do you want to do with the kids, right? And I might probe more, like, do you have a favorite teacher? Maybe you want to model yourself after a teacher. So like I like the way so and so taught me, and so I want to do it the same way. My mom is a teacher, right? And so I want to do what my mom is doing, right? So they may have role models in their life. So I would say, like, do you know any teachers? Do you like the way that they teach, and how do they teach, and what do you see that they're doing? And to because they may have role models,
Mm-hmm.
and so they want to model after that. Um, and I would even get into, like, what are the pros and cons of teaching, right? So what do you like about being a teacher? You get to work with kids, right? But I would get realistic and say, kids can be troublesome, right? And kids they fight back, right? And so how would you handle that situation, right? When they don't want to listen and they fight you, and how would you handle things like that? I wouldn't get into the pay if they're really young, but but just
Well, if
more
they're
if they're
older,
older, if they're
we might give you
older,
that.
I mean, I'd be like, hey, teachers don't get a lot of money, right? So, um, and how would you handle things like that? And even getting into the realism of it, right? Even like,
Mhm.
as a teacher, you have to prepare lesson plans, right? And that can take hours, right? And you have to have supplies, right? And sometimes you have to plan for a whole year, right? Can you do that, right? So getting the realism of teaching and putting that out there and putting it in a way that they'll understand, and having them say, I want to be a teacher because of these reasons. And with essays, also encourage them to contradict themselves in a bit and say, okay, I understand there's a lot of lesson planning and there's going to be those kids that act up, right? And, but I see how my mom does it in class, and so I'm going to do it the same way, right? Or I see how my own teacher does it, and so I'm going to do it the same way, right?
Right.
So you want to be a teacher because, one, two, and three, and then you have number four, where, okay, well, I see how being a teacher can be hard because of all these things, but there are ways to address that,
Right.
right? So
And,
I would
and
spell all those things out for them.
I love that conversation, that let's really think this through before you get started, because that's whether it's, arguing about whether you want to be a teacher or not, having that conversation and thinking through that thought process. But really, before any of these kids can really sit down and write, they have that blank slate in front of them. And sometimes talking to somebody about what you want to write about is the best way to get started with your writing. And so that would be maybe an additional tip that we could have had, is talk to somebody about it before you get started.
Right. And that too, thinking about it now, like, just even going back, even if you want to ask why, okay, you want to be a teacher. Why do you want to be a teacher? Oh, it looks fun. What's fun about it? Or you get to play with toys and you get da, 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 da. And then as they're talking, I I have this thing where I need things written down, right? If
Hmm.
you just keep
Hmm.
throwing stuff at me, I will not retain it. I need you to write it down. So that's what
Right.
I do in my sessions. So as they're talking, oh, it's fun. You get to play with blocks and have markers. And it's like, okay, so you want to, so teaching is fun. You get to have markers. You get to have blocks. And as they're talking, I would write it down
Yes.
so they see what they're saying. And I think there's something to seeing what you write or writing what you're seeing. I I think I'm
In
mixing up
your
the
head.
words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what's in
Yeah.
your head is
And
coming
getting it
out
down
on
on paper.
paper, and
Yeah.
you're seeing it manifest in
And I
paper.
think I think that's how a tutor can really help a student
Yeah.
is as they're talking through it, you're taking notes. My students do that a lot. And we have shared document that we share, and I'll just put it up on the board very much like we're doing here, and I'll just be typing down. Okay, you keep going. I'm going to write your ideas down, and they're like, "No, that's not what I meant." I'm like, "Okay, let's clarify that." So on this tip number 2 is research and gather your information, and your notes can literally be your thoughts as well. But let's go ahead and kind of talk about credible resources. And this is kind of a slippery slope here when we talk about the internet, because kids are going to be thinking that anything on the internet is true. Everything's a good resource. So, I mean, we could dive into that. But as they go, we want them to take notes and we want them to cite their sources. And of course, clearly, if you have a third grader, that citation is going to look much different than, a 12th grader or somebody that's in college. So knowing, again, the audience and the purpose for writing is really going to help when you go to take your notes, especially if you have to keep track of a bibliography. So far, I haven't had to do that with any of my students, in my tutoring business, but I did have my 5th and 6th graders when I was an upper grade elementary teacher work on citations, just teaching them, just basically, you can't just say, I got this off the internet. They have to know where it came from, what was the resource's name and location, and then teaching my students how to use hardbound books. I mean, those books are in the library. I know a lot of people don't rely on them anymore, but if they're going to go off to a 4-year college or even a 2-year college, they might need to know how to find a book in the library and read it or a portion of it and cite that resource. So as we take the notes, we want to consider how we're going to include them in our writing. And not everything that we take notes on necessarily has to be a cited resource inside of it. I mean, I don't necessarily have to use a blurb from it, but it might be something that I referred to. So essay writing is not the same as note taking. So your note taking is going to look a lot different than what the final product is. And that is always something that some of my students struggle with. They think because we took the notes that was the final product. And so sometimes having a mentor text, something that they can look at a final product and see, oh, here's what a final one looks like. Oh, I'm just taking my notes right now so I can make something that looks like that. And taking them through that before we even start actually helps them understand why we're researching, gathering the information. So I can make that argument about, oh, I can be a teacher and I can make money at it and I can, overcome the odds, whatever that happens to be. These were my sources that I used.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in terms of credible resources, I would gear this more toward like middle school, high school, college. Because I think that's maybe more so high school, college. That they're gonna have to look for outside sources, right? So you can't just because they're more likely writing like argument papers, and persuasive papers. So basically, you have a point, and you're trying to prove your point, and okay, so you have to find somebody outside to prove that point. Um, so with that, definitely books, although I'm more of a internet person. So that, I'm more of like, let's find it on the internet. But so in terms of resources, I know people have said to it has to be actual like articles and journals, so not um like opinion websites, right? I mean, I guess it depends on how you weave it into your paper, but in terms of like factual evidence, like stick to articles, stick to journals, there's scientific journals. I know I remember someone said go to the .org websites, avoid .com. So .org, .edu, those are the ones that are more reliable than the .coms. Um, I mean, books are always good. If you can find the book, go there. Um, particularly for maybe college students. So you also want to be wary of how each type of material, whether it's online or whether it's in a book, there's actually a certain way you have to cite it in your paper. But we'll that's a later conversation. But in terms of generally speaking, so credible sources, you can have faith in, like I said, like .edu websites, org websites. So those are more credible than the .coms. Definitely books, but factual books as well. Um, in terms of scientific journals, within the past, I believe it's recommended and within the past 10 years. So I think I think you want to have more up to date information. So whatever your argument is, people don't usually like you picking a something from like the 1950s, right? And we're in
Right.
2025, right? So definitely the more current, the better. So within the past 10 years is preferable in terms of the time that you're getting the information. Um, let's see.
I had another suggestion.
Yeah,
As you were talking, I actually looked it up just to verify. You can go to Google Scholar, and
yeah.
that is going to funnel you into some of those publications. The bad part is, and if you're in high school or if you're in college, um, you know, hopefully your high school or your colleges maybe they have the actual publication in the library. Maybe you can find something that's actually there. But sometimes you'll get into something that you have to pay for a copy of. But if you could just read the I don't know if they call it the abstract, but the summary of it,
Hmm.
and just go through and maybe see if that's something that you want to dive further into, that is definitely something. So if you're a parent or a high school student or a college student, you're like, oh, I hadn't heard about this. Okay, go to Google Scholar and you might be able to find some, a publication for what you're looking for. But don't discount the good old encyclopedia or a medical encyclopedia or medical journals, and get into your public libraries. They have a lot of free materials there. Maybe you can't leave with them. And sometimes you can go, and I know you're saying use current things, but even microfiche, and that is very old, but it's still out there. But if you're looking for something historical, that might be what you're going to have to look things up on. And so, really learning how to use some of those resources, I think it's important to know them. I'm just probably that old school. I still use online things, but it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're writing some sort of historical argument about why they shouldn't be, or even a current thing, maybe you're writing an argument about why they shouldn't be drilling for oil in this nature preserve, but you need to go back and find the historical documents for that nature preserve. You might be looking at something like going to a university and looking through their publications. So it's really going to depend again on that purpose, but take your notes. Make sure that anything that you are taking notes on, if you want to refer to that in your essay, that you are gathering the information about where you found it, and then find out, do you have to use a certain format for your bibliography? So make sure, especially if you're taking a course or something like that, that you do that. Is there anything else that you want to add about researching and gathering information?
Um, I think that's pretty much the gist of it, but if we can get into citing sources,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So you just want to be mindful. Like one of the things I don't like is when they're citing too many sources in one paragraph. So, because it's like it's just someone else's word. Like, what is your words? So that's something I don't like to see, and I don't recommend it. So if you are citing sources, maybe like one or two, don't overdo it, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't make you sound smarter. It doesn't make you look better, right? But what the teacher wants to see is you connecting what you cited and what your argument is. So, yes, you have your snippet, right? But okay, so connect the snippet to your argument in the paragraph itself, and then connect it to the argument overall, right? So the teacher wants to see more of your words and more of your explanation. So maybe no more than one or two um, in a single paragraph. Um, you always want to, again, there's a certain way to cite depending on the style, but basically as you want to lead with an introduction sentence. So as so and so stated, blah blah blah, according to so and so, blah blah blah. So make sure you do that. Don't forget the quotes, right? There is a thing called plagiarism. Teachers don't like plagiarism. If it's not your words, make sure you cite it. Put those quotation marks if it's not your words. Um, or if you can paraphrase it and just make sure as cited and so, right?
Mhm.
So
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that all of those things are really important for kids to know, and sometimes they just need more practice and they need specific examples. So providing them with something that maybe you've worked on, or finding, like I said, again, a mentor text about, okay, these were the exact words, and then, but this is a paraphrase of what I read about, and this is the resource. Those are two different things, but they kind of work the same. And I also love what you said. The writing has to be in your words. We're not just taking all this information from these resources, writing down in notes, and then chunking them together. Because, like you said, that's plagiarism and we don't want that. So, tip number 3 is to have a strong argument and a logical flow. So, this is really wordy. I'm going to read it and then we can pick one or two things. I don't know that we'll necessarily talk about all of them, but make sure that you have a clear introduction with your thesis statement clearly stated. Each paragraph should have a topic sentence with supporting details. And for me, that's the big part that I work on with my elementary writers, is just having a strong paragraph. Be sure to use your notes, include key items to support your argument, and cite your resources. We've kind of already talked about that one. And then develop transitions using words and phrases for smooth transitions, such as using furthermore, in addition, likewise, also, besides, and so forth. So you want to keep the flow going. You don't want to stay stuck in one area too long, because then you're going to bore your audience, and more words is not necessarily important. We want to be concise enough, but have enough information that we paint a picture of what we actually know. So there's a fine line between too many words and not enough words. And sometimes I get writers that have too many words and we have to chop, chop, chop. And then other students, I'm lucky if we can get 5 sentences. So it really comes down to the writer, how much they like to write. But that's my job, is to get them to look at it from like a third person perspective. Okay, this isn't we're not going to pretend like this is your writing. It's a friend's writing, and let's look at what you wrote and kind of go from there. But I'm going to let you hop in here and share your thoughts on this.
yeah, so I definitely getting your thesis statement and the details. I think you nailed most of it. Um, I think, I mean, there's I guess it also depends on like the school and what they're asking for in terms of even how to write a thesis statement. So there's this new way I'm seeing now, where they want the 3 things in the thesis statement. So I believe this because A, B, and C. Um, so as opposed to like I believe this because of, so it depends on the school. But I would say, yeah, so basically what I try to do, I think, or a way to be organized is, okay, so what's the point that you're trying to make? Right? Oh, well, I want to be a teacher because it's fun. Okay, so and you're gonna have to explain, okay, break that down. So it's fun because reason 1, it's fun because reason 2, it's fun because reason 3, right? So I recommend outlining
Mhm.
ahead of time. So you have the point that you're trying to make, and then reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. And then your conclusion, which is pretty much like a rephrasing of your thesis statement. Um, so what's the point you're trying to make? And then give me 3 reasons to back it up, right? So once you have your 3 reasons, and then you take each reason and you dive into that with like another 3 to 5 sentences as well. So that takes a lot of probing and digging and stuff like that. But if you outline first, right, and then you kind of just fill it in as you go along, that's a way to um, stay organized. So I
Yeah,
do see those students that just kind of just keep writing. So it's, it's not so much about how much you wrote. It's really mostly organization. Um, I say like an essay is really like 60% organization, right? And
for
40%
sure.
40% content. So,
Do
uh,
you use like any, like for my students, I'll use a graphic organizer.
yeah,
Do you
I
use
do.
it?
There's some I'm
Yeah.
experimenting with. Um, there's some I'm experimenting with. So some I just kind of like do the three reason setup. But there's some I've used graphic organizers. So, but the graphic organizers definitely help.
Yes, for sure. And it's really going to depend on each student how much structure they need, because just like some of us can just get up and just talk, that's easy for us. Some kids can just sit down and write. And so, take them where they're at. This is what I always do with every student. Find out where they're at and move them forward from there. So if they don't need that structure, go without it. But a lot of my students really do need that structure. All right, let's move on to the next one.
That was
Good,
it. Simply
good,
put.
good conversation. So, we've already talked about this, right? Clearly and concisely. Okay, this active voice. Here's the thing about this active voice. We'll get into this, but okay, depending on how you're writing, your voice either has to be in first person if you're doing something like a personal narrative, or it's the third person if you're writing a research paragraph or essay. Um, so you're not saying I, me. You're just talking about the topic, which is really challenging for some of my younger students. Even some sixth graders struggle with that. But we want to remember to vary our sentences and our words for our audience. We don't want to use words that either you don't understand or our audience doesn't understand. I'm not exactly sure what I meant when I wrote that. And then cut out unnecessary information and stay on topic, because it's so easy to go off topic. And that's why I think using a graphic organizer and, like you said, having the outline before you start based off of your notes, you kind of have that roadmap of where you're going to go. It's a little bit like planning a trip. You know that you want to go from your house to a different destination, and you're going to do your research before you go. You've set out a roadmap of where you're going to go, and then the trip is like you're going and you're following that, very much like writing your essay. You're doing the background, you know what you want to put in there, but then the trip is like writing the actual essay, and using everything that you looked at before you took your trip. So I'm trying to just equate that to something in the real world that might actually happen. You have to do your research. You have to know where you're going, and then you have to know what voice you're supposed to be writing in. So if I'm going to write about my day at the zoo, that's going to look a lot different than writing about endangered animals at the zoo. Okay.
Right,
So we have to understand that.
between first person and third person. Yeah. So it's
Mm-hmm.
basically um my time at the zoo is going to be in first person, which is I, me, myself, right? As opposed to endangered animals at the zoo where you're writing about something else. It's usually third person, right? You're using the person's name, Charlie went to the zoo, and so something like that. So you want to identify what you're writing, right? Is it a personal narrative, or are you talking about something that is happening? Are you giving an expose about something, right? So if it's about you, right, you're more likely to use first person. If it's about someone else, it's usually third person, which is someone else, uh, you know, using the actual names of the person. Yeah. I will say, in terms of concisely, like it's a small thing as well, but sentences, I see a lot of run-on sentences. So as a general rule, you know, one sentence I usually say should not exceed 2 lines of paper, 2 or 3 lines of paper, right? So I sometimes see one sentence and it takes up 5 lines of paper, and it's like, that is too long, right? So
Right,
let's
right.
let's
Well,
split
just
that up
and
into two sentences.
just teaching that basic sentence structure,
Yeah,
and if we're going to use those transition words, maybe that transition word could be used in that sentence, but maybe that
yeah.
could actually be two sentences. And then my sister is a college professor and she's an English professor. And one thing that she tells me she sees at the colleges that she teaches at is kids want to write as if they're texting. And we're not
Mm,
texting. These aren't, we're going to have a capital letter. We're going to have, a noun with a verb, maybe a prepositional phrase or something to add more details, but that's it. Like we're going to have punctuation, correct spelling, and it's like a lot of these kids are coming in without these skills, and these are college freshmen. So understanding this early and often as a parent or an educator and making sure that you're kind of monitoring your students' writing. Clearly, if I'm going to text somebody on my phone, it might look differently than the essay or the paragraph or the sentence that my teacher is expecting me to have. But even in email back and forth, sometimes if we don't have all of the information in there, it can be really misleading, right? So um, teaching the difference between, you know, that conversational talk and then writing for a purpose, that's important as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to add here?
yeah, yeah. Just to tag on to that, that's one of
Mm-hmm.
the things I learned in middle school. Like, yeah, don't write the way you speak, right? And I think especially now with the evolution of texting, um, it's showing up a lot more in writing, like just things like I'm trying to sound like LOL, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like don't put that in a paper, right? Um, uh, Even just simple things like the word we say info as opposed to information. So spell out the word information, right, in an actual essay. Um, Something like love, LUV, right? Actually spell out the word love, LOVE,
Right.
right? So it's this proper spelling, um, spell out the full things, not the abbreviation, right? Totes cool, that's text language,
Mm-hmm.
not essay language, right? So we definitely need to distinguish between text messages and essay writing. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the educators in your life are going to love you for that. Okay. So now we talk about the difference between revising, editing, and proofreading. Okay. So we want to reorder the content and remove unnecessary information. Okay. That's a revision. We want to refine our sentences to improve clarity of your writing. Okay. So that's could be revision or editing depending on what you're doing. If you're getting rid of something, it's probably revising. But if you're editing it for clarity, LUV versus LOVE, and then proofreading at the very end is once you have it in its final form, you're checking for typing errors, punctuation, and spelling errors. And hopefully we didn't have any in this conversation.
oh man, yeah, yeah, you definitely want to point out any typos and punctuation. I will say um a, a, a couple things with that is one, I highly recommend stepping away from whatever you're writing. So give yourself a mental break and then come back to it. Because sometimes where we're in that moment of cloudiness and stress, and it's like sometimes there's like a block in our brain, right? But if you're like, let me put this down for like 4 hours, let me put this down for a whole day. I'm not gonna think about it. I'm just gonna think about something else, and then let me come back to tomorrow, and then proofread and revise it. You'll go in with a clear mind, and you're like, oh, I didn't even notice this, right? So I highly recommend as you're revising, as you're proofreading, step away for like a day, clear your mind, think of something else, do something you love, and then come back to it and look it over again. Because when you go in with a clear head, you'll see things more. Another thing, what else? If you could have someone else proofread it as well, sometimes you may see things or you may not see things, right? But you give it to someone else. Hey, look this over for me, and they may see things that you never thought. You're like, well, I didn't even see that, right? So if you can have a different set of eyes, I think that would also help you as well.
I agree with that. So many times when I was in the classroom as a teacher, I would create a message to send home to parents, and we were going to mass produce it. And I looked at it again, had somebody else look at it, and you run it off, and you're like, oh my gosh, we both missed that. We had the wrong day, we had the wrong time, we had, spelled somebody's name wrong. I mean, just totally didn't even catch it. So even when you're using, your grammar checks and things like that, they're not going to catch everything. You maybe aren't going to choose the right choice for the word, or maybe that word's not in your dictionary or whatever. You could probably use a resource like Grammarly, maybe to help you if you really need that. But I do think another person having eyes on it is really important. And then you can talk about it. And as you read it or as they read it, maybe they'll ask you a question for clarification. And maybe you thought you really explained it well, and suddenly we find that that didn't happen. So yeah, another set of eyes for sure. All right. Anything else here?
Um, no, I think we pretty much got it. Definitely don't just do one and done. Definitely read it over. Well, let me make sure this is correct. I will add another thing. And it might be depending on the generation, but as we're kind of merging more into a digital age, I recommend proofreading it on the computer screen as well as on paper. I find that you see differently when reading your essay on paper as opposed to on a computer screen. Especially with paper where you can kind of lay things out, and it's easy to flip back and forth between the sheets as opposed to on a computer where it's just one way and you're just kind of moving up and down, but it's really just the one way. um so I would also recommend printing out your essay and reading it on paper, as well as reading it on a computer screen, and uh proofreading it that way as well.
Yes, I agree with that. I think those are great tips. Very good. Well, I think we've talked a lot about essay writing, but now if they want to get back in touch with you, these are all the places that they can find you. Is there one in particular that you'd like to talk about? I know you mentioned your clearly the podcast.
Yeah. So, yes, all my information is on the screen right now, but I will just say it for anyone listening on a podcast. So, if you want to learn about my company, A Step Ahead Tutoring Services, you can go to our website. It is a step ahead tutoring services.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube with the handle A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. We're also, well, if you want to follow me personally on Facebook and Instagram, it is just my name with the period. So it's Gabrielle.Crichlow. Um, Going back to A Step Ahead, we're also on X and TikTok. The account handle is ASATS2013. I should have put my name after, but that's fine. But definitely, I want to highlight my podcast that is through my company. It is called Hot Topics. It's a very common podcast name, I know. So make sure you find the Hot Topics one with my logo, the pencil
Right.
with the gray and black tip. Make sure you type in A Step Ahead Tutoring Services and go to that Hot Topics. But
Yes, and I love your
yeah,
little pencil because that is what I look for.
yeah, so look for the pencil with the gray and black tip. Type in A Step Ahead Tutoring Services. Look for that Hot Topics. I want you to get that particular Hot Topics. But yes, subscribe to our podcast as well. It's an education-based show, so you get tips like this, but also other people come on to talk about a variety of topics like mental health or physical health or robots taking our jobs, or there's a lot of homeschooling. There's a lot of other tutors talk about the tutoring industry as well. So I encourage you guys to check out my podcast, Hot Topics.
Absolutely. I enjoy it as well. And if they're looking for more information about Sheryl, that's me, Tutoring with Sheryl, and the Tech Coach for Tutors. You can find me over on YouTube. I have two channels. The first one is really for parents and educators, and the second one, Tech Tutor Innovate, is for the educators who are kind of wanting to expand their tutoring operations, move online. They're really kind of looking for systems to kind of get things going. My website for tutoring and also for the Tech Hub is at tutoringwithsheryl.tutorbird.com. You just have to find the menu for the Tech Hub. And then you can find me over on Facebook, Tutoring with Sheryl, and Instagram. So also, if you look for Tech Tutor Innovate, you'll be able to find me there as well. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate your time. Any last insights about essay writing or anything else that you'd like to share? Feel free to do it right now, Gabrielle, before we sign off.
But yeah, so this was meant to be very general. I just want to reiterate that, right? It is specific according to your grade level. So for like college students, that would be even more research, right? Um, right. So, and there's different formats. There's the MLA format, there's APA, there's Chicago, right? So it is specific to the grade level. High school may not be that as intense. It's probably more MLA format in high school. Maybe the sciences would be APA. Middle school, I don't really think it matters that much in terms of the format, but might be leaning more towards the MLA format. But basically, however you're writing your essay, make sure you figure out, is it a particular topic? Are you answering a specific question that they're giving you? What type of format? Do they want citations? Do they want resources? So get all of those instructions before you write your paper and follow all of those instructions.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for joining me today. I can't wait to catch this on Hot Topics. And you guys, everybody, make it a great day. And as usual, keep the learning going.